happy to be here and support and to kind of show you how I've used Cami in a wide range of ways, but today looking at Jigsaw, so something that I'm passionate about.
Steve did a session that was asynchronous for us last Webisode Wednesday for the January session, and it is available on YouTube. So I'll drop the link to you guys in the chat once Steve gets started, but I encourage you to take a look at that because he goes over SAMR model and Cami, and there's a lot of great nuggets in there and ideas. It's a very excellent session. So if you haven't yet been able to access that recording, I'll put it in the chat and I highly encourage you to do so.
Hey friends, so again, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. You'll have my contact here if you ever need support. All the support that we offer here at Cami is 100% free, 100% unlimited. So that's like my little spiel on that, but just know that I am here for you. The first thing we'll kind of talk about, like if you can in the chat, like kind of how do you see Jigsaw? Like to what degree do we know what the Jigsaw method is? Like where students are really going to take a piece of the curriculum or of the term or of the small subject, like, right? It doesn't have to be, we can really do this on a more micro level. But students are really going to specialize in that one thing and then take that one thing and share it out with their peers. Instead of being like, hey, I have to teach 1, 2, 3, and 4 concepts today, you're going to have the students jigsaw those 4 concepts for you, do it collaboratively, use cooperative learning, and really share amongst each other. And it really eases the stress and the pressure off of you as the teacher, but also off the students too, right? So like it gets them more engaged in their learning. And so for me, this was really powerful. I built this out in a Cami. And if you're ever in the Cami Chrome extension, if you click on that, you can upload any graphic like this or resource you have just by clicking on Google Drive. It moves it right into the Cami app. What we're going to do first is we're going to build out our teams, right? So that's the first step here. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll down and you'll see like, here's the first page from my graphic. Team, this team is like glue. Yes, like glue. And then the other one is Clever Cats, the Rat Pack. I always love this one with my students because I'll be really strategic with the group. I mean, like, what group is going to get a kick out of this and play along, right? We're Lost. And a lot of times that was the group that really leaned into We're Lost, whether it was intentional or not. So what I'm going to do is with the people that we do have in the room, if you wouldn't mind, like we'll start like top down. So the first 4 to get on this doc, you'll be like glue. So you'll have one name by clicking on, let's say, the Cami text box. And you'll type your name right here. Okay. And so you'll do that first. And maybe I'll participate. So I'll be in like glue. And then someone else will come in and click over here and they'll be cultural. So one name per box, because we're trying to differentiate and have 4 people per page here, and 4 people per group, the best that we can. So I'll be in this group. I'll be the political. I'll explain what that means in a bit. I'll be the political side of things for like glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the top right and share this Cami doc with you. Click that shared link here. And just know that anything that you share with Cami, you have this feature control button right here that allows me to pick which tools I want you to have. So for this one, all I want my students to do, or what I want you all to do right now, is use the text box tool to just drop in your name. So I'm going to turn everything off except for the text box, because if this is like with real students, I wouldn't want them to get distracted by all the other tools. With Jigsaw, there's a big classroom management build or consideration with it. Go ahead and click on that link. You'll log in, and then starting with page 2, go ahead and document your names, get into a team, get into a group. We have, we're like glue. And so for those that you know that we're in like glue, so that is the team, right? That is the group. We're going to do something called the 4 worlds. And the 4 worlds is a framework. And so I am friends with the person that runs this website, that runs this work. The 4 worlds is a social science framework, but I'm a believer that it can be used across multiple grade levels. I just did a session on this last weekend. So we had discussions of how this can be used for ELA, for math, for science. And so what it is, there's a video, and I will drop this link in the chat for you to bookmark and for you to check out later. And so what it is, and let me click on where it says the 4 worlds. Let me click on that one. There is a library database. Okay. And so you can search any of these basically lessons, right? Basically like projects, like collaborative experiences. And I use this for Jigsaw because it really does foster a Jigsaw environment that I feel is quite effective. So if you click on one of the resources, it'll give you something like this. So let me jump over to here and show you that this is generally, it looks like a Frere model, right? But this is where 4 students are in one group, and each student is assigned a world. Now, notice that I have the political world for our, experiment, but Alia has cultural, and then Jessica has economic. No one in the social world, and that's okay. So whatever topic is here, and by the way, like when you open this up right into like you open this up as a PDF, like, oh, I like this framework. If you have the Chrome extension, you can just select open with Kami and it moves it right into the Kami app for you. And so when you're looking at this, normally, like you see this example, whatever concept, excerpt. I used to use a lot of primary sources, letters that soldiers were writing, right? I would put it in the middle of this framework. Because here's the thing, no matter what it is, whatever that item is, whatever that term is, whatever that idea is, it will impact the political world in some way. It will impact the economic world in some way. So your job in a moment is what you're gonna specialize in that world, right? And so we're gonna have a concept here, whatever it is, and you're going to try to think and document in your square only, how does this thing impact my own world? So specializing in that political, economic, social, or cultural world. These cards are just to, hey, we have just the cards of what group you're in or what world you have. By the way, on their website, you can print out. They have printables, and I laminated mine. So that way, like, I'll just throw them on just, here's a pod, like a 4 desks together, right? My students were always in pods like that. And then students would just pick a different card every day. Or you can be like, you know what? You're always a social world. Have another one. And you're able to remix this. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So we now know what our groups are. I'm going to scroll up here and see under my agenda, I have the 4 worlds. This is the one we're going to be collaborating on. So if you click on that, and I'll also drop this link in the chat as well. What you can do is I took this Frere model out of the Kami library. I took it and I made duplicate copies of it using a tool called split and merge. And I made a bunch of copies for the amount of groups that I feel that we could have. And then for each one, I put a different topic. So each group would be specializing in a different topic. And then within that given topic, one person is going to specialize in their world, whether it's political, cultural, economic, or social. So like glue, we have this Cami comment up here. So we know that Steve or Alia and Jessica, we all should be on this page here. Okay. And we're all going to document only in our square. So my square, I'm only the political world. So the topic is technology in education. So how can technology in education impact the political world or the cultural world or the economic world? So with the three people that we have on this page now, and hopefully we're all there, it looks like we are, we're going to take a moment and document how technology in education will impact their own world. So we need to give that think time, give it a few moments here, and including myself, because I'm a part of this too. So kind of give us some time. As we're adding ideas, it's important to point out that while what's on this page is brilliant and amazing, if you were to, initially start doing things like this with your students, they will look at this blankly and look at you blankly and be like, what? And that's completely normal, right? And so we have lived over the course of time in an education system that really promoted consuming content in some way, holding that content in a small box for a small amount of time, and then pushing out that content in some way, whether it's a test or an essay, whatever it is. This, though, you have to think. And that's where my students really struggled, at least initially. They're like, I never had to think in this way, right? And so just to get your ideas out on the page, sometimes it's an issue of accessibility. And while the Four Worlds is a wonderful framework, and you have a lot of paper-based resources, if you were to do this in a tool like Cami, it really helps the students think out what they're trying to put on the page. And so I'm going to go to a different group page here just to show you, because sometimes what students really need is they need to go to that comment tool and go to that voice comment, and they just need to talk it out, right? And being able to express themselves in that way. And that's something that they may need. And while they're all working, this part of the lesson always was, it was a very quiet room with the occasional like comments. The other thing they can do is they can go to the add media, insert a YouTube video that represents what they're thinking, or use the camera tool and record a video and have them like, express themselves in a different way, and then have that embedded and accessible for their peers right here in the Cami doc. And so you'll also notice that I did it, and it may have been Jessica, like at this idea of adding images to the page and to the content, right? So what I mean by that is from like a UDL perspective, showing the content in a wide range of ways, different ways to represent the content. So what I have here on this doc, and so while students are working in real time, I would display it in front of the room, kind of move to different parts. So like the full room could see all the different ideas that were being presented. While we're collaborating, so I'm in my own world, right? And we have someone in the social world. Jessica's over here in the economic world. I may need my peers' ideas to be accessible to me to understand how we're going to collaborate in a bit. And so what I can do is I can go to the dictionary tool and click on any of the words within someone else's text box to help me better understand, better maybe terms that there's some things that my peers know that I don't, right? And also being able to have it be read back to me and having that level of accessibility. If somebody were typing in, let's say, Spanish, I could have it be defined using the dictionary tool in that language, right? So that's the other piece of making this accessible from like a collaborative standpoint. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, here is where things get a little interesting. So we initially did this in isolation of everyone's in their different world. But if I go back to kind of the example here, what this turns into is whatever ideas we have in whatever world, political, economic, social, or cultural. What I have my students do is I have my students then collaborate in their group and draw lines, making connections from their own world to a different world. And the conversations that take place during this part of the process is pretty phenomenal because students will have real meaningful, in-depth conversations without me having to do hardly anything. And I would just drop by and hear some really powerful conversations happening with my students. So what I'm going to have us do is now, in whatever world you're in, go ahead and I'll kind of do mine as an example. So I have over here, I'm going to highlight, I'm going to use the markup tool. I'm going to use the freehand highlighter. Jessica right here has, let me pick a more prominent color, hardware and software needs, right? Yes, but I'm going to make a connection between the hardware and software needs in the economic world. And then I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to draw a line, maybe same color, yellow, to something that is connected to my own world. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle and connect it to non-educator decisions. So what I mean by that is people in Sacramento that they're making a lot of decisions on behalf of educators who are not educators themselves. And you can think and feel however you want about that. But the connection here is that there's a lot of decisions that are being made in Sacramento around possibly what funds could be allocated or perhaps what frameworks are going to be promoted or just general decisions with hardware and software, right? And so that's one connection. And then people are already starting to draw on the dock here. But yeah, go ahead and draw out, make those connections between what's something in your world and perhaps another world. It's going to get messy, but it's supposed to be that way. So I'll kind of give you a moment. This will be a little challenging. So if you do want to unmute and maybe chat a little bit, drop stuff in the chat, by all means, feel free to do so. So here's the thing about Jigsaw, at least for me, it's about setting the tone. You have to train the students to do it. And so hopefully I did at least hopefully a decent job of modeling how I would train students. So it's essentially what I did for you today. But once they get it, and you can pull this out whenever. So like little to no work on my end, but there's a huge effect size here, and I can only speak to that from my own experiences. But it's the same thing with like edu protocols, right? Like rinse, repeat. You do it on a regular basis. Students get better at it. Students get better at talking, at collaborating, at thinking. Jessica earlier talked about like, you know, the depth of knowledge with all this, right? And you can be anyone to do this well, right? Like you don't have to be that straight A student. You don't have to be that athlete. You could come in with whatever background, whatever baggage, wherever you come, you know, from in life, and do this effectively. And it makes the learning experience really equitable across the board and levels that playing field. And imagine you're doing this. Imagine if you see stuff like this across every page, and now you have this documented, and I can come back and share this out. I would share this out with colleagues. I would share this out like as a bulletin board that would get sent out to my parents, right? You can do a wide range of things with this. To take this to the next level, so like here's the thing with Jigsaw is sometimes, so we did the steps of we specialize in our own worlds, but now we're collaborating and now we're making connections, like how this world is really connected to my own world, and students really don't get that. And here's why. At least at the secondary level, we learn math in this room, and then we learn science in this other room, and then we learn history in this other room, and they're all in isolation of each other, right? And so there isn't enough cross-curricular instruction going on, in my opinion. But this helps break down that wall. This helps break down that barrier of like seeing visually and orally, talking out of how all this stuff is connected and how the world is intertwined and nuanced. The one thing I would do is sometimes towards the end of class, like if we're like right now, we have about 9 minutes left, and you're like, all of my kids are done working. What do I do now? This is what you can pepper in at the very end if you have time. And so what you can do is we all have our lines, right? So whatever line that you have, so I can see there's a green line right here. Any annotation that I hover over, it gives me the initial of that person that made that annotation. And then if I hover over the initial, it gives me the name. So I can see that Jessica added this line right here, this black one. And so she it's like going from green to black. But she's, you know, she's kind of connecting globally competitive job markets to new cultures. So you can do a number of different things. One is you can, if you have it presented, and if your students are comfortable with each other and comfortable with you, you can be like, hey, Jessica, why did you make that connection? And kind of do that think, pair, share. And then if you're doing it across the board, you can be like, oh, here's this other concept that I was going to, instead of lecture on, I now have you all curate into this doc on, right? And so, and hearing different perspectives on, let's say, different topics, or I've done it where it's the same topic, like it could be technology and education on different, just on the same page, but I have them grouped out that way, right? And here's the other thing you can do is you could then have students, and go ahead and do this for me. You kind of just, you can just say whatever you want, but just to practice, you can go and click on the comment tool and either use the voice comment or the video comment. And I'm going to ask you to justify one of your lines, justify one of your connections. And then you would simply just hover over wherever your connection exists. And boom, it's now recording a voice comment. So think about what doors could open from like a blended learning standpoint, where students can also drop in good ideas, regardless if they're in the room or if they're on the moon. It doesn't matter where they are. They can be able to contribute and think out when that thought, when that idea comes to mind at that given moment. And then, so that's something that you can do, is you can drop in those comments and have students justify, right? And collaborate. And then if somebody is dropping in comments like that, someone else can reply, right? Give feedback, provide good ideas, make this that messy place that has a whole lot of learning. Because we want to talk about, so in case you don't know this about me, I support student teachers out in the field in my area. I work in a credential program, and I love that my student teachers, they really try to get the collaboration going. But then my thing is like, where's your evidence of learning? How do you know they learn anything? What data did you collect while they're collaborating? That's the struggle. How do we collect data while we get students to collaborate? And this is how, or at least this is one way of how to do it. And so that way you walk away and like, you see all of your ideas, you see all the thinking, you see all the contributions that are being made, and you're like, here is my evidence of learning. And now I can take this data, this experience, and carry it over into the next lesson. Can carry it over to be like, hey, these are some good ideas. Now let's unpack this now for the next lesson. I'd also use this as a starting point to get them to figure out what topic do they want to do for the next Socratic seminar. What topics do you want to curate and work on for your next project-based learning experience, right? for your next initiative on campus, whatever the case is, right? And really take that, that real world application and apply it in a very authentic way in their school, in their hallways, in their communities. And so, again, this is how I jigsaw. This is my one pager. So you'll have access to this. You'll have access to my content. You can find me on Twitter if that's something that you do. But if you want additional Kami support, professional learning support, over here at Kami, we're not your typical vendor, right? Like, we're not teaching tool by tool, but rather we're trying to support you in the real ways that my team, that real educators like myself, are using Kami in the classroom.